Counselor Cassett,
I'm here.
Counselor Lindell,
Here.
Counselor Rivera.
Here.
Counselor Villarreal,
Present.
Counselor Romero Worth.
I am here, although I don't have any internet. Are we having
You
trouble with
have
this?
A quorum.
Thank you. Okay, sorry, guys, I don't have any internet. I should have checked that first. Yes,
Are we actually on?
I don't know. Are we on?
Yes, I got a little thing saying that this webinar is being live streamed.
Okay, so you see us on.
Well, I got a little notification. I can't confirm at the moment.
Yeah, no, I think on our side we're streaming, but I have no internet. A snowy night here in Santa Fe. Let's see what we can do.
Can you use data on your iPad?
I'm not getting a cell signal either. Oh, it says my Verizon plan has expired. Oh, isn't that special? Okay, bear with us here. It's a city iPad. I don't pay those bills.
Yeah, you might have to restart Councilor Merworth. That happened to me on my phone, my city phone.
Bear with me, everyone. Do we have a printed copy of the agenda? Thank you, sorry. Okay, we are on now to approval of the agenda, and I understand there are changes from staff.
That is correct, Counselor Romero Worth. Staff would like to remove, it is item F from the agenda for tonight.
Okay, and that is a request for approval of agreement to terminate power purchase agreements between the city of Santa Fe and, how do you say the name of the company? Designo?
Madam Chair, Designo.
Designo Holdings LLC. All right, any other changes?
No other changes.
All right, any changes from the committee?
Move for approval as amended?
Second?
We have a motion and a second, and do I need to do a roll call? Because I've got people everywhere. We'll do a roll call on approval of the agenda.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Rivera,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth.
Yes. Okay, we're on to approve. So that motion passes. We're on to approval of the consent agenda. And are there items the committee would like to hear tonight? I see Counselor Cassett's hand is up.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I would like to, item I, please.
Item I. Others?
Madam Chair, item J.
I and J. Okay. Okay, anything else? Don't see anybody waving at me. All right, is there a motion?
Move
To approve as amended.
Second.
All right. We have a motion from Counselor Lindell, a second from Counselor Rivera to approve the consent agenda as amended. One more roll call, please.
Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Rivera,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. On to presentations. We have an audit update for FY21 from Emily Oster, our finance director. And I'll let you take that from here.
Thank you, Counselor. I'm pleased to be with you tonight to give you an update on where we're at with the status of our audit. We are moving ahead and we are having our first in-person fieldwork this week with Carr Riggs and Ingram. We also have a staff member from our Clifton Larson Allen consulting team on site this week. He's working with staff on debt, including bonds and loans and capital assets. Let's see, what else? We're just excited about the visit from Carr Riggs Ingram. We have a full day planned on Thursday and we're, forging ahead with 21, and most of the consulting work now is really focused on 22. So that's the update on the audit. I also wanted to provide an update on staffing in the finance department. We do have a lot of activity. We've had some challenges with recruitment, as many folks are having in today's tight job market. Particularly, I wanted to mention that we had an offer out on the controller position and that candidate declined. So we're working on re-advertising. We have a vacancy rate of 26.8% currently, which is the same as what we had in November. We were down to 25 in December, and that translates to a difference of 1 position. We have a total of 56 positions in finance and 15 are currently vacant. We have 2 internal promotions in process and 2 external hires in process. And I expect those all to be on board in their new positions by early February. So that's exciting. And then the rest of the positions are in various stages of recruitment, everything from we're just about to post to we're post interview and we're working with HR on salary offers. So I just wanted to speak a little bit about that. I would like to see us going the other way. Of course, we don't want to see the vacancy rate go back up, but it really just reflects the change of 1 FTE total in the whole department. And I'm confident that with these 4 hires that are in process, we'll continue to make progress on lowering the vacancy rate. Madam Chair and councilors, that is my update for this evening.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Not seeing any questions. Okay, we will move on then on this snowy night. To the consent agenda. And the first item that was pulled was item I. And that is a resolution adopting a strategy for donation or selling at below market value a property identified as Las Estrellas Tract 6A to a developer certified as a qualifying guarantee under the New Mexico Affordable Housing Act to develop Santa Fe Homes program homes, low price dwellings or units price restricted through another affordable housing subsidy, and approving the announcement to sell the remaining 7 Las Estrellas lots with a local preference. And I believe we have a variety of people both on Zoom and in the chamber to help us tonight with this item. And we'll start with Councillor Cassett because you pulled this item.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. So I had an opportunity to have a robust discussion about this at EDAC, which was wonderful. So thank you all for who were there. There was one item that was kind of hanging after the EDAC discussion, and that was this conversation about what type of assurances do we have that if we sell to somebody with a local preference and they receive this 6% boost in their offer. So essentially, if I'm understanding this correctly, they go out for bid, you get points assigned to you, and at the point of the price, if they're local, their offer is considered as if it's 6% more, correct?
Yes, Madam Chair, Councillor Cassett, I don't know if my team is at the podium, so Ms. Salazar can answer the question if not, I can.
She is here, so I'll let Andrea Salazar with the City Attorney's Office talk a little bit about how the local preference works, I think is the basics of your question, Councilor.
Yeah, I'm making sure that I understand it fully before I go on to my next question.
Okay, so if we could get a quick tutorial, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, Councillor Cassett. So yes, with the 6%, it would mean that the purchase price was increased by that 6% of what they offered.
And so their points would essentially be assigned on an RFP that way, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so it's a possible scenario that somebody could come in, they get the boost, but somebody still has more points than they are, and it will still go to whoever has the highest number of points on an RFP. Is that, am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. So one area of concern I've had is that if somebody wins the bid with a local preference, and then they flip it, and that there's then this concern that it doesn't go local as it was intended to, and then somebody is making money off of that. We had discussed at EDAC that there might be something in the purchase agreement or some way that we can protect against that, have assurances. I'm sorry, I'm so distracted because when you're talking on Zoom, you also see yourself talking on Zoom, and it's extremely distracting. So I apologize. But some assurances that there's a way for us to prevent that. I don't know if I understand that doing a clawback would be administratively extremely complex and not something that the city is really set up to do. So I'm curious what has been discussed since EDAC and how we might be able to prevent this type of scenario happening.
So to clarify, you're asking what regarding if a purchaser were to receive the local preference and then resell the property either tomorrow or, in a couple years, holding that property to an out-of-town developer instead of them developing it, is there a mechanism to ensure that they don't do this? And so technically we could put a provision in the purchase agreement that says it would be a breach of contract if there was a time frame attached to it. Like if they resold it within the year and did not develop it, we could have a breach of contract. So that is a provision we could do. The breach of contract would mean that we would have to file a lawsuit to go after them for that breach of contract. We had discussed something like an escrow or a clawback provision, I believe, a long time ago, whether we held money in escrow and then released it to them if they did start developing and building. That was a very complicated scenario when we were discussing it, and something that I think would be very difficult for the city to do, especially in the finance department, holding something as if a title company, and then for a time frame, if they didn't develop it, we would not release the money. So that type of suggestion we had talked about as being very difficult and probably not something that would be successful in moving forward with this. While we could do a breach of contract provision, we still would need to figure out what the time frame would be, what the request would be to hold back or to hold someone to the purchase agreement as being a local preference provider. So those are defined terms that I don't necessarily know how to proceed with unless there is guidance about what the specific request would be, whether it's development, whether it's parcelization, whether it is within a certain year time frame they're not developing. So those things have to be fleshed out a little more to really understand what the request is, or I guess what the goal is of withholding or being able to have a breach of contract should something happen in the future.
Right. And if we did put in a provision for a breach of contract, we essentially then have discretion as to whether or not we would want to open up a lawsuit. So for example, we sell it to somebody, something happens, they go bankrupt. I mean, we kind of want them to sell it and we want to get this thing developed. So if we were to put in something in the lease agreement at that point, would that governing body or us, depending on when the time frame is, have the ability to essentially have this discussion of whether or not we would want to bring a lawsuit?
Chair, Counselor, yes, that would be the discussion. We'd put in a clause that says if they did such and such, it would be a breach of contract. And then we'd have to come back to the governing body to see if we pursue that lawsuit specific to the circumstances.
Okay.
And
Madam
then, Chair?
Yes, absolutely.
Madam Chair, Councillor Cassett, I just want to make a clarifying point. This is not going to be a lease agreement. It will be a purchase agreement. Because you mentioned the word lease. It's a purchase agreement.
Did I? Sorry.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks for getting that. I knew it was purchase agreement, but thank you. So where was I going with my, so if I'm understanding you correctly, would you need an amendment to this resolution in order to be directed to put something like that in there? Or is this something, because I mean, do we have to flesh this out in this resolution at this time with all those details? Or is that something that would really be hammered out at a later date?
I think, Chair, Counselor, so the resolution is to release the public sale and the RFQ for the property. It wouldn't be a term of bid. We could include it in the purchase agreement. If there is desire to put it in the purchase agreement. If you would like to memorialize it as an amendment to this, then we could add it as something, as an amendment to this resolution moving forward.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. I do not have any further questions at this time.
In the chamber, we have Counselor Rivera, then I'll go to Counselor Lindell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Salazar, with regard to the clawback, how many tracks are we looking at?
So the sale of land, Chair, Counselor Rivera. So we're looking at selling 7 tracts of land. They're of differing sizes. And then we're talking about an RFQ for a potential donation agreement for 1 tract of land.
So all tracks are being sold individually? Or is this all the tracks together?
Chair, Counselor Rivera, the proposal is that the RFQ for 1 tract 6A would move forward alone. The 7 tracts we're proposing to sell would go together as a sale. And the reason being, we would prefer to have 1 developer that we transfer developers' rights to, and that includes declarance rights, that includes responsibilities over easements, rights of way, open space, parks, trails, that kind of master plan information.
So is the local preference for all the tracks or for the 6A and then the other?
The local preference currently is for the 7 tracts of land for sale. It is not for the 6A donation agreement parcel.
If somebody that doesn't receive local preference purchases the land, would they still be subject to the clawback agreement if we decided to do it?
Chair, Counselor Rivera, that's a good question. And I think that at least in listening to what the desire is regarding the local preference, it would be regarding the local preference. So should a bidder have the 6% local preference, so that 6% benefit, they would be the entity that would be prohibited from resale. So if they did not earn that local preference, they would be free to sell it however they want, should they want to sell it the next day or sell it in 3 years from now, parceling it out.
And have we done this with other city properties that we've sold? Put a clawback? I don't know if they've all gotten a local preference or not, or if any have gotten a local preference, but have we done a clawback with any other properties?
So 3 answers to your question. First, we have not done a local preference for a sale of property yet. Second, if we have done clawbacks or land use restrictions for specific types of property, and that's usually our affordable housing pieces of property. We put land use restrictions and covenants on those. We've never done it for anything we've sold at fair market value, which is what we're saying we're selling here with these 6 tracts of lands. We're putting them on the market with the appraised value of the land.
So the clawback then would only apply if the developer received the local preference.
I believe that is the proposal.
Okay. Is that what you're talking about, Councilor Cassett?
Not quite, because a clawback sounds like it's much too complicated. So I'm looking more at something in the sale agreement that it would be a breach of contract, that if they received the local preference and then turned around and sold it in whatever time we said, that they're not then honoring why they got a local preference. Because the whole purpose of them getting a local preference is we want to keep business local. And we want a local developer here. But if they then use that local preference to win the bid, and then turn around and sell it for a profit, that is what I would like to work to prevent against. So it would not be a clawback, but rather in the purchase agreement, it would be a breach of contract is what I'm understanding.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Lindell on Zoom.
Thank you, Chair. What was the appraised value of the property?
Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, I think right now we're at 5.1 million, 5.199 million, I think is the appraised value.
So 5.2 essentially.
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
Okay. And could you talk about the donating part?
Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, I think Director Ladd is here and Ms. Salazar could speak to the donation of the 6A parcel. I can't see who's at the podium.
Yeah, Director Ladd is here.
Oh, there she is. She's got her hat on.
So I guess the question is, how does the donation for the affordable housing work? Is that the question, Counselor Lindell?
Yeah, I just am trying to find out, because part of the caption is donating, so I'm trying to find out what we're donating and who we are donating it to.
Madam Chair, Counselor Lindell, we don't know yet. What we would do is exactly the same process that we followed with 635 Alto Street. So we would describe the property, do a basic assessment of land use requirements and limitations, write an RFP looking for a developer, stipulating the desired amount of affordability. And then we'd put it out to bid. And if nobody shows up, we know that the market's not going to do it. And we will either revise the RFP or turn it into open space. You know, we don't have to sell this property. We don't have to donate it. We're just looking for an opportunity to leverage affordability out of it. So we do have to work with the market in that process.
Is that property part of the appraised property, or has it been appraised separately?
Counselor Lindell, I believe it's part of the overall appraised value.
Is that is that track the one that is extremely difficult to build on?
Madam Chair, Counselor Lindell, it's certainly not easy because everything up there is hilly and has a lot of drainages, but this particular piece does have a relatively flat, contiguous area, so it certainly could be built on.
Okay. And as I understand it, aside from that track, we're trying to sell all the other tracks to one purchaser. We're not selling them individually. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, that's correct. And one of the main reasons is that we don't want to parcel out the land so that one developer or any developer could say, well, I only want these 4 and you have to keep those 3, which
does this property has a master plan already, correct?
Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, that is correct.
And is the purchaser obligated to the master plan?
Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, they're obligated to the master plan.
And part of the purchase on this, of course, at a appraised price of 5.2, which will probably be a little bit less because of that tract that we're talking about donating. We're talking about a $300,000 bump, right? Approximately.
Madam Chair, that's correct. If a local developer achieves both levels of preference, there are 2 levels, 3% for one and 3% for the other, they would have a $300,000 bump.
Okay. So it's one thing to come up with the money to purchase the property. It's a way far different thing to come up with the money to develop the property. How, do we have any tie-in with this or anything contractually or any part of the any part of the agreement that they show fiscal ability to develop?
Madam Chair, Council Lindahl, it's a very good question. And a part of our evaluation will be, just to your point, you need to have the capital to purchase, you have the proof of capital to purchase the land. And then you have to have some sort of proof of development financing or capital to actually develop the land. So that's a part of what will be evaluated against whether or not you're a local developer. That's just one of the requirements that's been added into this resolution. But we will evaluate based upon the ability to buy the land and then the ability to develop, finance it based upon the master plan.
Okay, so that brings to mind another question for me. Are we, is it two different things? Are we looking at one entity to purchase and develop?
Madam Chair, Council Lindell, that's a good question. We're looking for one entity to purchase and develop because it is a master plan.
That's going to take a local entity with a lot of financial flex.
Madam Chair, that is correct. The local preference was not a suggestion of the staff, so we're adding it in as a way to evaluate an opportunity to incentivize local developers, but we can't sort of
Sorry.
I guess comment on. Oops, sorry.
My
A dog
dog,
chewed away.
she hasn't touched that toy.
I had to
in
kick
a
my dog
year.
out for this meeting. So. Oh.
Um,
Sorry, I didn't know if I.
yeah,
answered.
I'm just, there's not really a question in this. It's just a statement that that's going to take a local developer with an awful lot of flex to purchase a $5 million property and have the financial wherewithal to develop that property. That's no small task. So we'll see. What's the time frame that we think that this will go out?
Madam Chair, Council Lindell, what we're looking for is the consideration for this resolution and the purchase, hopefully by the end of this month. And then the public notice of sale will probably go out about 3 weeks afterwards. And keep in mind that then there's probably a 3-month process of the candidates pulling together their proposals. And then the evaluation team looking at the proposals, coming up with a candidate that met the criteria and is ready for a purchase agreement. And then we'll come back to the council, let's say by May, June, we'll come back again with the purchase agreement of the candidate that we're working with.
I think that, that's terrific, but I think it's an extremely optimistic timeline for someone to get their financing lined up and do their due diligence in that amount of time, although I do realize that the master plan exists. How many houses are in the master plan, excluding the, I think it's lot 6 something that we're holding back?
Parcel 6A.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, Council Lindell, I was going to ask Ms. Salazar to answer that question. I think we have the answer, but I don't have it compiled here.
Ms. Salazar's here in the chamber.
Chair, Councilor Lindell, so there's a total potentiality of 599 market rate units and 60 affordable housing units. you have to subtract the 6A. So 6A has 103 market rate units and a potential for 13. So that's about 16 units removed. So it's in the 400s.
Madam Chair, Councilor Liddell, that's 483.
Oh. Okay, but we're looking at that 6A as, we're looking at that 6A lot as being donated to be totally affordable, correct?
Madam Chair, Council Lindell, I'm going to ask either Ms. Salzar or actually Director Ladd can respond to that because you can't do 100% affordable, I don't believe, and she can speak to that question.
Madam Chair, Counselor Lindell, we're going to see what the market will bear. It's possible that we would follow more of the recent HomeWise model where we would have set asides for income qualified buyers and renters up to 50% of units and then 50% at market rate, but it's really not the prevailing market rate, certainly not for that part of town. It would be more of that affordable to the workforce buyer or renter who earns a little too much to qualify for subsidy. So somewhere between 120% of area median income and the 140 or 160. In normal times, they're completely priced out of the market, particularly in this part of town. So it's still a big opportunity, but we don't consider it restricted housing.
Okay, my concern is to be sure that I mean, it's 103 lots, correct?
Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, oh, Ms. Salazar can answer the question.
Chair, Counselor, so it's not exactly 103 lots. So the way that this is divided is while there are 7 tracts of land that we have acquired, they range in different size amounts, and each one has a different designation of potentiality for market rate units. So the breakdown isn't, I'm sorry, maybe you're talking just about 6A. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So 6A's potential is 116 lots. It doesn't, or units. It doesn't mean that it's 116 lots necessarily, but I think the master plan included a provision for condos and potential apartments. So it could be built up, not necessarily lot-wise built out.
Okay. My concern is, and how do we determine if that property gets donated, if we're going to discount it? I mean, that's a lot of units for us to not gain anything on the ground itself, considering that then we have to contribute on entitlements also. Well, I mean, typically, and maybe not now, but it used to be that affordable developments or developments done by, for example, HomeWise, they were still paying something for the lots, be it $20,000, whatever, but it wasn't an absolute donation.
Madam Chair, Counselor Lindell, the price of the land would be directly tied to the amount of affordability. So if somebody came in with unicorns and rainbows and said, we're going to do 100% deeply affordable housing, well, they are going to get the whole thing for free because that's amazing. And they need that to be able to meet that accomplishment. If they're going to come in with a more varied income model, which I personally think is probably what the market can bear, is more likely that what the market can bear, then we would scale the cost of the land accordingly. But you know, at the end of the day, it's going to be below market.
Yeah, Absolutely, I agree. I just wanted to know how we were doing that. I think that that's all I have for now. Have we had interest in this property from, be it local purchasers or national purchasers?
Madam Chair, Council Lindell, it's a good question. Over the last almost 3 years, I've had at least 4 local purchase developers with interest. And we originally went out on our first foray of trying to do this public sale. We received about 6 inquiries from regional national developers. And we have not, done any marketing recently because we don't have the authority to do that. But I do know that there still are 4 to 5 local developers who are here and know that we're debating this this resolution. So it's on the people's radar. So.
Okay, I think that I think that's all the questions I have at this point. Thank you for everyone showing up and answering these. I think we, as said, we haven't done this, and I think we need to be cautious and not make mistakes with this. It's a big project, and we need to be really, really careful that we get it right.
Okay, Counselor Cassett, if it's okay, I'm going to ask a few questions before I go back to you. Is that okay? So I'm not sure, and I want to have Ms. Salazar confirm this. So the 6A track and then the 7 additional tracks can't be all $5 million. Because why would, if we're going out for 2 different purchasers, why would one purchaser pay for something they're not getting?
Chair O'Meara-Worth, so I believe the 5, I'm trying to see if the total amount of land is what was appraised. I believe that our last appraisal done on November 15th, 2021, did the total acreage of 250.1 acres, which was the total of 5,199,000. So I believe once we remove the section of 6A, that'll decrease that amount. But I don't know if, I know that our memo currently doesn't have the separated amounts. We just have the total value of the entire land. So based upon either having a new appraisal or removing the appraised amount, and I do not have the appraisal with me, but having that 6A removed, it would change the appraised amount of the 7 tracts of land.
Because in my conversations with you both at Public Works, Public Utilities, and in the meeting we had about this, we've been using this number of 5 million, give or take, for the 7 tracks that would qualify for the local preference. And we've been using the 5 million as the way, and I think Councilor Lindell did it tonight, saying there could be a quote unquote $300,000 bump. But those numbers aren't really, I mean, they're close, but they're not completely accurate. Correct? If what you're telling me is true, that the whole thing is worth 5 million, some odd.
Chair, that is correct. And additionally, since our appraisal was done in 2021, it also could have increased since that time. So we probably need to do a new appraisal, which is requested at the end of this resolution, that will give us further information as to what the 7 tracks are worth and what that 1 6A track is worth. But this is kind of the starting point of understanding how much this property currently is worth or was worth.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Chair, if I could answer.
Yes.
Your question's a good one because we cannot start the reappraisal process until this resolution has passed. So we have to make the assumption that it's the current master plan that we're going for public notice of sale until we have governing body approval to take the scenario that's in front of you today to move forward. And so will be a new appraisal based upon the decision of the governing body moving forward.
So I think it's really important that we be very clear, because this is new information tonight. I think I thought this was a lot closer to being the numbers we're talking about, and that it's not very accurate, I would say, especially if we're going out for a new appraisal, because I think the environment's changed, hasn't it?
Madam Chair, Madam Chair, I think you're correct. The environment has changed, but in the scheme of land sales, this is a very sort of small amount for this amount of land in this type of city. But to Councilor Lindell's earlier point, the devil's in the details, because the financing of the master plan is where they will have to have a bigger capability.
Okay, and so we're going to go out to, our thought is here, we're going to go out with one process for what we're calling the 6A portion of this property. And that piece is, we're looking for a builder who is very, very heavily into the affordable housing, because we're looking to donate the land. Am I correct in that?
Madam Chair, I'm going to have Ms. Salazar explain how the scenario works.
And then the second piece, the 7 tracks, right, is we're looking for a developer who's probably going to be much more, I don't know what the right terminology is, commercial, more like not as affordability. So, I mean, I'm thinking HomeWise maybe for the 6A, and, some other type developer for the 7 tracks.
Chair, yes, as proposed, the resolution is looking for a donation of 6A, potentially if we can obtain affordable housing provider that can build out and develop that land. As Director Ladd had explained, it depends on what that looks like, whether they can build all affordable, build half affordable. So the donation portion is still not necessarily defined. The 7 tracts of land would be market rate for a developer who would be building out in accordance with the master plan. That master plan does include affordable housing on those tracts of land, but not, it wouldn't be a donation of that land. It would be sale of that land, so they build out pursuant to the master plan.
And the 6A portion is not subject to the master plan because we're donating it?
Chair, the 6A portion is subject to the master plan. We can remove it from the master plan, and we could remove it from the condition or the covenants and restrictions if that is requested and required. But that would mean that any developer who received that land would then have to do an amendment or re-entitle that property. So while it is subject and it does say the highest density could be 116, it still could probably be lower because that's the highest density threshold.
And the resolution doesn't require any level of affordability in order to get donated land. You're just looking to the market to say, well, we can only do 5%, 1%, I don't know. And then they get donated land to do basically market rate to support some small portion of affordability.
Madam Chair, are you speaking
It's about
specifically
6A.
about 6A?
Yeah.
If we were to donate that land for market rate affordable housing, we would be in violation of the state constitution.
Okay.
We would
Good to know.
never, ever do that. The price of that land, whether it's a discounted sale or a donation, is directly proportionate to the amount of affordability, to the degree that a proposed project can meet the city's policies and objectives to provide affordable housing. We absolutely 100% cannot donate it unless we are leveraging affordable housing.
Okay, but we don't have a percentage that we know we're going to get out of it. I mean, there isn't like in the New Mexico Constitution or state statute, something that says that if you do this, you have to get 50% or something, 60% affordability.
Madam Chair, we never would donate more. The rule we followed, and it's not written into our code, but it's our practice, is that the donation is the percentage of the value is directly proportionate to the amount of affordability. So a project that proposed 50% affordable would get a 50% reduction in the price of the land. Now, we have flexibility there. So if a project proposes 50% set aside the way we require it with a tiered pricing schedule, so actually having to subsidize very highly the lower priced homes, we may want to give more of a discount for the remaining market rate portion if, for instance, it meets the other part of our code and the definition of a low price dwelling unit can be met. Or, as I mentioned before, the HomeWise model where they're targeting the 120% area median income workforce buyer or renter, well, buyer in their case, because they're a home ownership agency, up to 160% of AMI, because those folks don't qualify for subsidy, but they are also priced out of our market. So, we're looking at, we would never just arbitrarily say, oh yeah, and you special developer get a good deal on this. We're going to have, there has to be a demonstrated benefit to the public, to affordable housing that meets our policies and objectives.
Mhm.
Okay, and we talked a little bit about this. How are we going to make sure that one portion of this isn't moving faster than another? Because I'm concerned that, let's say we find that the 6A track, because it's better land, in essence, it's not as hard to develop on as the 7 tracks. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's my understanding. What happens if we get an affordable developer who jumps on that really fast and the 7 tracks maybe doesn't sell, and then we're holding the 7 tracks and we've kind of sold off something that would help us sell the whole thing? Does that make sense? Like, how do we make sure that these things are moving kind of?
Madam Chair, I don't know that it matters, because this tract, we're really looking at it as a separate project than the other 7 tracks. I never have a problem if affordable housing gets built first. Like, that should be a good thing.
Yeah. Well,
So,
but
and we don't need to sell the other tracks in order to support the affordability of this one.
right. So but what I'm concerned about is that then we can't sell the 7 tracks. Like when we first talked about this, we were going to sell it, the whole thing as one. Right? And maybe Ms. Salazar is the one to answer this. And I see we have 2 counselors that dropped off. I hope they don't have internet issues. Oh, one's back. There we go. 2's back. Okay, good. Glad to know you're here. So yeah, when we originally were going to sell the whole thing, right?
Sure, that is correct.
And I mean, is there some risk to the city in dividing this up, in that, you sell the 6A and I agree, great, we get affordable housing, terrific. But then what happens if we can't sell the 7 tracks? Because my understanding is the 7 tracks, part of the reason why they haven't been developed to date as part of this overall master plan is that they are very difficult properties to develop. They're hilly, they've got arroyos, they're, it's expensive essentially. And could we get left, holding this property? What level of risk is that? Because we want to get out from under this property.
Madam
Chair-
Chair, go ahead, Ms. Salazar, you want to speak first?
Sure. So I think the first thing to understand is that, yes, we inherited or we received a bunch of property that is hard to develop. And that includes both 6A and the 7 tracts of land.
Okay.
So, and there is no guarantee that if we go out to bid for either a request for proposals, or if we submit this out into the world that anyone is going to buy it. That first off, we never know if that's going to happen anyway. With 6A, we have, long ago when we did first put this out on the market, there was a lot of interest in 6A and maybe some interest in other remainder parcels. So it is a parcel that we know probably has some potentiality, but we also own all of the land right next to it. So there's possibility of also developing that land out should we want to in the future. But we hold a lot of land in that area. We hold the Camino La Tierra trails that abut this property. So there is no guarantee that it will be sold. But it would likewise, if the city did hold on to it, it would also have contiguous parcels along with it that maybe could be reconfigured or transitioned with development.
And Madam Chair, if I could add to that.
Yeah, yes.
From an economic development standpoint, there is a large organization here, LANL, who is hiring 5,000 people a year. So there is a developer community that knows that there is a LANL organization who is desperate for market rate housing and mid-range housing. So we probably will see interest from developers on this property because there's already a built-in organization that has a employee base that is expanding like crazy, and it's close by.
Okay. So just to go back to how this works, the seven tracks that we would try to sell at market rate, so a local developer could come in for $5 million, for $5 million plus the 300,000 and maybe win the land. But then it's another $30 million we've estimated to bring in the infrastructure. And I think that's what you told me at the last meeting, correct?
Madam Chair, that's my estimate. It could be
Like-
more, but that's where
Yeah.
you can start.
And that's really the rub, right? That's what makes this expensive for many of our local developers.
Madam Chair, if I could answer that is a correct assessment, but keep in mind that the local developers could be almost like the general contractor. They could have syndicates of other financiers or developers on their team, but they're kind of the lead developer for their proposal. And that's what I think we're trying to get to in our last meeting, was that we cannot control the types of candidates that are coming forward. So we may have local developers, but they could be part of a larger group of developers and capital providers, et cetera, to prepare themselves to develop this based on the master plan.
So that's an interesting assessment, that they could be like the contractor, because what you've said is, so let's say they buy the land, a local developer is able to buy the land with the local preference, but then they're probably going to have to partner with people who are not local in order to have the capacity to actually develop it. And I think we discussed, and you have said tonight even, that what will happen is they'll parcel out the different pieces, and then there's no controlling, if I buy a parcel and I want to have out-of-state architects or builders, that would be my right. Correct?
Madam Chair, based upon the master plan, they'd still have to develop based upon the master plan.
Right. So the local part of this, we only control a very sliver of the local, which is basically the price of acquiring the property. After that, who knows?
Chair, that is correct. There could be a number of scenarios that move forward where a local entity or person does purchase the property and subdivides it into different parcels of land and has help from other developers elsewhere that could build it out. I think that's always the potential with development. subdivision and parcelization is really the way that development does move forward because it makes things more affordable. And once you start having people buy the land and invest in building, that's when things start to work in towards the subdivision of the property. So that should be an expectation that eventually it probably will be subdivided by a number of entities. And there is no guarantee in the control of who we sell it to that won't happen or that will happen.
Right. So I think it's really important that we understand how far this kind of local preference carries us, right? Basically, it's the sale of the land. After that, we don't know. Could be flipped, to earlier counselor's points, or it could be parceled out in a way where we certainly don't control where the money goes that it develops the land, that actually develops it, the different parcels.
Yeah, that is correct.
Just one other question, then I'll go because we've got a couple hands up, and then more hands over here. So now I've lost my train of thought. All right, I'm gonna go to Councilor Cassett, then we'll go back to Councilor Rivera, and then Councilwoman Villarreal. Is that all right? Or
I actually have some clarifying just points based on your
Okay.
questions.
okay.
Um,
Councilor Cassett, is that okay if Councilwoman Villarreal goes ahead? Councilor Rivera, you're all right with that? All right, Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess what I wanted to convey is that I'd rather us try a local preference than having nothing. And all the scenarios of what ifs are possible. Those same scenarios are possible for any of our land that we're trying to sell. I think the difference for this one is that we have the opportunity for a parcel that could be focused in on affordability, which we don't usually have that option. And so that's why I think there is a benefit. It may not be the kind of economic benefit that we normally see, but it would be an economic benefit and a social benefit for our community. The other piece is,
Except that the affordability piece is not what I was talking about. And the local preference, my understanding, is only for the 7 tracks. So they're 2 separate things.
well,
You don't
I-
have to have the local preference in order to donate the land 6A for affordability.
we could, if we want
That's
to add
not
it,
what we're
we just think.
That's not what
that-
we're doing. That's not why we're offering the local preference.
But there is a possibility for there's a possibility for local people that have already expressed their interest of local affordable developers for that 6A. In fact, so I just think that there's options. And I also think that you said something about being under, that we're under, this is not like Midtown where we're paying, we're in debt. This is land that's for sale, that will be for sale. And if someone is able to either bring a team together with a local lead, or someone from out of state decides they want to apply or bid for the sale of it, that's possible too. It's just that I think we need options in our city for affordability. And we don't have that right now. So I think that the other parcels will, it's like, we'll see what happens. And if somebody is able to put something together for the other 7 tracks, it's just that when we have a piece of parcel that's ours, that we have an ability to build for affordability, then I think we need to capitalize on it.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. But they're two different processes, right? There's the affordable piece, which is 6A. And then there's we're providing a local preference for the 7 tracks. And that's different than, and maybe we'll get some affordability out of that, but that's not, the 7 tracks are very difficult land to build on. Not likely we're getting affordability out of that because it's so expensive to build, but the 6A track I get. So, but they're
Well,
two
there is
different,
a
they're two different
percentage.
things.
There is a percentage on the market rate, the other 7 tracks that they're required to have a certain percentage of affordability in the master plan right now.
Okay, we have people nodding their heads in agreement with you. I don't know that everybody can see that. All right. Councilor Cassett.
Thank you so much. So now I just want to clarify based on those comments. So 6A is going to affordability. That does not have a local preference on it. That's just, we're going out, give us what you can give us in terms of affordability. The 7 tracks have a local preference on it, correct? So these are 2 separate conversations. Am I understanding that correctly?
Chair, Counselor, yes.
Okay, good. Thanks. I got a little confused after that one. Regarding the idea of a consortium, I'm glad you brought this up, Rich, because this was the question I forgot to ask. If 4 people come together to purchase, one of them is local, 3 of them are not, do they still get the full 3% bump? Or do they get a quarter of the 3% bump? Is it kind of related to who's local?
Chair, Counselor, it's based on the entity purchasing. So let's say that a conglomerate creates an LLC to come purchase this. That would not receive local preference, because if they just created it as of yesterday, they wouldn't be able to receive either preferential. But if they're an entity that has multiple partners and was created 5 years ago, they could apply for both portions of that local preference if they're in Santa Fe or Santa Fe County and they have a resident business license. I think that's what it's called. Certificate, then they could apply. They could have other people in the background who are going to be providing them money, but we would never know about further documentation, meaning after they purchase it, they could have another entity that they join together and develop. But what we're talking about is at the moment of purchase, if we're providing a local preference, they have to meet those local preference provisions, whoever is purchasing the property.
Okay, thank you. And right, that's clarifying that it was, 3 years that they have had to be a business license in Santa Fe, and last year, New Mexico.
Right.
Tax and Rev business certificate, correct? Wait, provide a New Mexico Tax and Rev Department resident business certificate. How long does that take to get?
Chair, Counselor, I don't know how long it takes to get, but you have to provide that you've been in good standing with Tax and Rev, I believe, for a certain amount of years in order to receive that. So there is a time frame provision for both of those. I just don't know the exact.
One's easier.
One is easier.
The Tax and Rev one's harder to obtain.
Okay.
Correct.
Good to hear. Okay, that was my only question. And I do just want to clarify, like I I've struggled with the local preference piece, and it's not about not wanting to do this. There's just kind of all these different pieces that I think it's really important to think about. But also I think that it's important that as we're having this conversation, when we say we don't do this on other land use pieces, we also have never done local preference on land use. And so I think that it changes the game. It definitely changes the game in terms of kind of understanding how we both, I think we're in this interesting balance of how do we both try to bolster the opportunities for local developers, for local purchasers. That's something that of course we all want to do. And also, how do we protect the interests of the city? That if we lose out on $300,000, it could be put towards one of the many other things that we really want to fund in the city. To me, it is a benefit if we're assisting local economic development and if we are able to do this. But again, my concern becomes, how much does this actually stay in, and what are the different ways that the money could potentially filter out, that we have lost that money that could be utilized for other things that we find to be really important, as opposed to it staying in town. And so I think that that's been the piece of trying to understand where our safeguards are, that if we're going to be providing this local preference, how do we do our best to really make sure that we are truly experiencing the impact of that? And at what point does the balance tip where we've given a local preference and something happens that no longer we're getting the benefit, and it would have been, more advantageous for us to get the money that then goes into our general fund that we then get to disperse out for the variety of things that we would like to fund, numerous programs and staffing and kind of all of those pieces, or, whatever it is that we would budget those dollars for. So I think that that's been kind of my challenge, is I understand there's a balance, and at what point does it tip, and how do we best put in provisions to keep the balance on the side, that if they're going to get this local preference, good, we want the money in our community. We want the business in our community. We want the economic development in our community. And we don't want it to leak out in some other way. So thank you.
Councilor Rivera.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Salzer, you said the 5.1 or 5.2 million that the land was appraised for did not include 6A, but you weren't sure how much 6A was actually appraised at. Is that correct?
Chair Councilor Rivera, yes, I believe the 5 estimate 0.2 includes the 6A and the 7 tracts of land, but I don't know the exact amount that the 6A was appraised at within that appraisal.
And according to the memo, it also includes tract 8B1A. So that would have to be taken out as well, the appraisal for that piece as well.
Great question, Chair Councilor Councilor Rivera. It's important to note that tract 8B-1A is solely for community services permitted. And those permitted uses are police station, fire station, library, administrative offices, or recreational use. So I don't believe, and I have to check, that that's a high appraised value, meaning it's a small piece of land that's supposed to be dedicated to the city for those community uses. So it's not a residential tract of any kind that could generate income.
Yeah, my point is that it was still included in the appraisal, the total piece. So it'd be nice to see what the appraisal of just what we're talking about is actually going to be. And I support the affordable housing piece. I think in the grand scheme of things, whether it's 5.2 or 4.8 million, 3%, regardless of whether they team up with others, or, if we end up losing out on that amount, it's not a huge amount compared to the overall picture. So I think it's worth at least trying. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Lindell, your hand, I think, is up. Yeah.
Yep, thanks. Yeah, I think the affordable track is a great idea, and I hope we can have I hope the Unicorn Brigade does show up. Maybe yes, maybe no. On the rest of this, it doesn't have great significance to this local preference. I know that it's been made clear to us that the department did not bring it forward. When you look at it as how much money per lot, this is a subsidy to a builder or developer that can afford to purchase a $5 million piece of land. I don't know if it's necessary or not. And I share Councilor Cassett's concerns that, this just seems like it has a lot of different outs for not really benefiting the city of Santa Fe and the citizens of Santa Fe. I'm concerned about it. I love the idea of the affordable. The other part of it, I'm just not sure that that's a necessary thing. And, you know, doing a subsidy to a developer, I don't know if there's a local developer that will buy this piece of property and then actually develop it. That's a great concern to me. I don't feel like giving a subsidy to somebody from another state or even another jurisdiction in New Mexico. This is, you know, we came by this. It hasn't been an easy process. It's been long and drawn out for years, and it's an extremely difficult piece of property. So there's a part of this I'm all in for, and there's a part of this that I really don't know that it was necessary, or in the long term that it's something that I'll support. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. All right, a couple more questions. So if the land is parceled out, so it gets sold, and then the developer, I don't know what happens next, but let's say it gets parceled out. Is that developer who bought it then the declarant? Like, how do we make sure that we, the city, are not going to be left being the developer?
Chair,
Because we don't want to be the developer. We've already got enough going on.
Chair, so first I wanted to add that thanks to Nina Cisneros, she sent us the appraisal. I wanted to add that tract 8B1A is appraised at 75,000 and tract 6A is appraised at 415,000. So those are the numbers. But
Wait, let's do that again. Say that again.
so tract 8B-1A, which we're not selling, it's the 1.85 acres for community services, was appraised at 75,000.
Okay.
The tract 6A, which we're talking about as affordable housing tract, was appraised at 415,000.
But then what about the 7 tracks? We don't know what they're worth, but we've been saying they're worth around 5 million.
So altogether, it was appraised at 5,199.
Yeah. But
So we'd have to remove the 490,000 from that value, and that would be the remainder tracts value. They're each identified as individual values in the appraisal.
okay. Back to my question.
So with regard to declarance rights, currently we hold declarance rights. There are a couple of scenarios. We could extinguish declarance rights, meaning before we transfer it, we could get rid of those. We could also assign declarance rights to the purchaser of the 7 tracts. That is the scenario that we accepted declarance rights under. So when we accepted the property, developers and in discussions, we said, we'll hold declarance rights because declarance rights is a large, broad thing under the covenants and restrictions, and a developer might want to hold all of those rights. And so that is why we're looking to sell all of the 7 tracts together to also assign declarance rights to that individual or entity that purchases the 7 tracts of land. If we did not sell the 7 tracts of land, we would still continue to hold declarance rights until we either extinguish declarance rights or we sell off the property.
Okay, so, but whoever buys it with or without a local preference is most likely going to take the declarant rights.
Chair, yes, that's correct.
And therefore, we're out from under being in control of developing and making sure it's all in lockstep with the master plan. Well, except I'm sure there's all kinds of permitting and approval processes.
So removing ourselves from declarant rights isn't about the master plan as much as the covenants, restrictions, and the boards that govern those covenants and restrictions. So we
Okay.
would be out of being the developer arm, meaning overseeing easements, overseeing drainage, parks, trails, and development of the property. So that's what we would be out of. We would require that they build out in accordance with the master plan. And you had asked about parcelization. So the master plan delineates certain sections that have a certain density related to them. So a developer would come in and provide plats, design plats to build out and subdivide in certain sections. And that's how it would move forward. And that's how it would become parceled out.
Okay, so but the parcelization doesn't change whoever becomes the declarant.
Chair, it does not. So the entity that initially holds the land, if they parcel it out and sell the parcels individually, they can still hold declarance rights. There's a trigger for when declarant rights do terminate, and it's a certain percentage of lots that or land that is extinguished by declarant. So once they, I think it's 45%, but once they hold less than 45%, the board becomes composed of mainly homeowners, not declarants board members. And so that's when it starts to transition into being overseen by the boards, not declarant.
Okay. And again, you know, I like my colleagues have no problem with the affordability piece, but I remain concerned that, and I think what you told me, and I'm just going to confirm that I understand what you told me, that if 6A goes forward and we find an affordable developer who wants to take, who we can donate the land to, and they want to develop it and they're going to create affordable housing on it, and then we can't sell for whatever reason the 7 tracts, the market just isn't interested. You're saying that those 7 tracts are near other parcels that we own, and we may still be able, even as we own them, we may be able to utilize them even if they're not developed. What I'm concerned about is you know, if we sold the property all as one, we might have a better, well, I don't know. I guess that's the real cost benefit analysis, right? Is we might get it all sold, but we wouldn't get as much affordable housing. So, but we might also, in this scenario, get stuck with the 7 tracts and not be able to sell them because they're very hard pieces of land to develop. But you're saying that may not be such a bad thing because there's other tracts of land around it that we may be able to change how they're used, and it may not be a complete loss. Director Brown, you're wanting to jump in.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, no.
I want to just be clear that the master plan for those 7 tracts includes about 400 some homes. So there is an opportunity for a developer to build 400 some homes in that master plan. So there, to me, I'm optimistic, local preference or not, I'm optimistic that a developer will want that property to build on those tracts in the master plan. So separating out the 6A parcel for affordable housing, there's still an opportunity for a developer to take advantage of that part, especially in the conditions we have here in Santa Fe.
Okay, so you think the risk is pretty low that we're going to get left holding these 7 tracts if we get rid of the 6A piece for affordable housing?
Yeah, I'm sure. I think the risk is low. A couple of reasons why. 1, they have to buy the whole thing, and 2, there are enough homes. There's enough tracts to develop as homes that we have a market for it.
Chair, I think it's important to add another way to look at this. So if we went out to put this out for sale and no one bid on a fair market price, then that tells us that potentially that isn't the fair market price. And we technically could put it out to bid and see what people bid for it. And the city could sell it for that bid amount. So that is one potential if no one ever were to bid on the appraised price. The other potential is that the city could hold those tracts of land. It does not have any debt service on it. It does not
Right,
have responsibility.
right.
It could start to decide how it either builds it out or it could hold it. And what I was talking about was it abuts the La Tierra trails, meaning that, you know, people are using those trails and walking through them. So even if development weren't to happen, there would still be use of the land while the city holds it. Does the city really want to hold it and be declarant? Probably not, but we could extinguish declarance rights. There's a lot of scenarios that could happen if there wasn't a purchaser for the 7 tracts of land.
Right. And I think that's the thing. That's good to know because I don't think we want to be the declarant. And I don't think we want. Yeah, we don't want to be the declarant. So if we can extinguish that, if we can't sell those tracts, that would, we'd have to, I think. Because it's not worth us being the declarant. Unless we think the economy is going to change and there's some potential that this land maybe isn't going to be sold now, but maybe could be sold, I don't know, 5 years from now in different economic circumstances.
Sure, true. When we did put it out for interest, we did receive a lot of interest. So I think, you know, what Director Brown is talking about is that people have been waiting for these to be released. And we really won't know what the desire of the community is or of the development community until we release it for sale and see what the response is.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing is that we also can't guarantee the benefit from the local preference. So, I mean, maybe we'll get a benefit. Maybe we won't.
Mhm.
I mean, and what level of benefit we get, we don't really know either. But what did you call these, Director Brown? Known unknowns or something?
Yeah,
last
known
time?
unknowns. Yeah, we know that we will have candidates, developer candidates, but it's unknown how many will be local, how many will be regional or national. It's just unknown until we put the public notice of sale out.
Okay, Councillor Cassett. Oh, we've generated a whole bunch of hands. Councillor Lindell first, I guess.
I lowered my hand, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Cassett.
All right, I'll go then. So just I want to clarify, you know, 6A, I like this plan. I think that that's a really good way to go. The local preference, I'm not unwilling to try. I'm skeptical. I really am. I'm skeptical about it. My thing is I just want to see where we can shore up some of where I see potential leakages. But that does kind of beg the other question of, I've been making assumptions and I have not asked this question. What type of benefit do we expect a local preference to give the community if somebody local purchases it? And conversely, if this is something that we are looking at trying out, how do we measure the benefit to see if this is something that would be worthwhile to pursue again in the future?
Madam Chair, I can answer if Ms. Salazar is not there.
She's here, but however you guys want to divide it up.
Okay. I'll give you my opinion, Councillor Cassett. The local benefit, I think Councilor Lindell sort of articulated, but the local benefit really ultimately doesn't do anything more except incentivize the local developers to apply for, to purchase this land. There are stages of development. There is the purchasing of land, there is the financing for developing, and then there is the I call vertical housing, and then this is sale of housing. They're all transactional deals that the city gets money from. The local preference really goes away once we find a candidate, whether it's local or not. It's all done. And so whether you have a local preference or not, you still are responsible for development financing. You still are responsible for adhering to the master plan. You still are responsible for developing the land to sell the parcels. It's just this first foray in the public notice of sale, you get an incentive to come to the table with your deal.
Okay, so maybe this is a question for the sponsor of, if we're talking one developer gets a benefit. I'm just curious as to the benefit that you all were coming for with the local preference. If, one individual is able to purchase and they just get an incentive there.
Well, we have local preference right now because we want to stimulate local businesses. That's what we use right now in local preference. I think that the incentivization is the benefit. I mean, we want local people, we heard from local people, developers saying that they wanted to be able to have an opportunity to develop this land. So this is a response to it. I'm not a developer, I'm not benefiting from this, but I want people to be able to have an opportunity which doesn't come around very often of a local preference, especially in a land use capacity. But, it's like our local preference, we try to utilize this in other ways with contracts and such, but it's really about supporting our local businesses. And, I don't think we have, I guess, again, we don't have many options like this. That I don't know if, I think Councilor Garcia is also on. He's one of the other sponsors. If you wanted to share any perspectives.
Are we promoting Counselor Garcia?
Counselor, let me see if I can.
Since I believe
Yes.
sponsors have been asked a direct question.
Hello,
Hi, we can hear you.
all right. Madam Chair, Councilor Cassett. So there's two parts to, I guess I'll approach. And the first part, I think, is the question around what are we trying to accomplish with the local preference? Councilwoman Villarreal kind of hit it on the head in regards to, we have heard loud and clear from our local developers that they should have an opportunity to develop this property in a sense that they can then give back to the community through using local subcontractors, et cetera. I think Director Brown mentioned that earlier. We, if folks may recall, we went through this process, I think it was in fall of 2021, where I think all of us were behind the process of local development and allowing for local preference of local developers. What got us hung up was, how do we differentiate and determine what local means? Because we were all, I think, from my recollection, the entire governing body at that time said, yes, let's have some type of local preference. Through the research and support of staff, we've been able to develop a process that clearly shows what local means. And that is through the city business contract process, as well as the state process. So we're able to then distinguish what it means to be local. I think there are rightfully so a lot of assumptions regarding what happens to flippers or if folks are parceling out. I, on the flip side, want to give the benefit of the doubt to our local developers, and they're not going to do that. I think having the perspective of that the property is going to be immediately flipped by developers shows no faith in our local developers. We need to have all faith because we are working together as a community. They've come forward with an ask. We're doing everything we can to meet that ask. And should the governing body adopt and move forward with this local preference, I strongly believe that these local developers are going to do everything they can to use local contractors, keep the resources local in our community, and ensure that it is a success. Because once we demonstrate that this local preference process can be a success, it can be utilized for future projects. And I think that's ultimately what our local developers want to see, is some type of process where as we are moving forward, developing our community, there's a process where our local developers have an opportunity, because right now they feel like they're being strong-armed out of the process. And we need to ensure that we're providing every single opportunity we can for local developers. So I think hopefully that helps to answer your question, Councilor Cassidy, in regards to what are we trying to accomplish with local development part of the resolution.
Yes, that was helpful. Thank you. Thank you both. I mean, and I think that, there is this aspect, there's a lot of really well-meaning developers that are wonderful. And I think that if we were to put in some provisions, it wouldn't impact them, because that is not their intention. But it is to, just in case there are these opportunities for loopholes that I want to make sure that we're closing. But I do think that if somebody is coming to the table and really wanting to work in this community, those loopholes aren't going to be a problem and wouldn't need to, it wouldn't really come into play. So I guess I don't see a downside to maybe shoring up some of the leakage where we do have a mechanism, even though we definitely do not have a mechanism anywhere or everywhere, excuse me. We do have one somewhere, but that it can both strike the balance of, wanting to keep business local as well as protect the overall interests of the city. So that's what I'd like to see. I know this starts to strike a problem of this does call about an amendment. And one of my concerns here is that this has been delayed a long time. And as Director Brown mentioned, there's a lot of people that are eager to get this on the market. So, I as one of the authors of the procedural rules, I do not like amendments at governing body, especially substantive ones, as this would be. But it is something that I think I would like to really explore and see if there's an option to in some way shore up leakage, while not doing so in a way that feels so incredibly punitive that it would counteract any incentive. So I guess I'd kind of leave that to the body about moving this forward to governing body, understanding that there might, or the committee, understanding that there might be a substantive amendment at governing body. Oh my gosh, is this going on the 25th? That's already the most full agenda that's ever been an agenda. Okay. So I'll leave that up to kind of discussion among the committee members as to, or holding it at finance, or we can refer to public.
We can't refer.
We can't
refer. No, and it's already been to Public Works.
Oh, okay. Well, never mind then. So
We're
yeah,
going to move on in the essence of it's a snowy night, and we're all downtown here. So can we go back to the non-presentation view? Because I can't see whose hand is up and who isn't. And I like it. There we go. Love it. All right. I'm not sure whose hand was up first, Councilor Lindell or Councilor Villarreal.
Madam Chair, I just had a clarifying question for staff related to Councilor Cassett's question about an amendment.
Okay.
When we initially worked on this, and I mean, I think it's a good point about making sure that we tighten up the local preference so that there's no ways that people would try to take advantage of it. Or, I mean, I see your point, Councilor Cassett, but I guess I'm wondering for staff, I thought that these kind of provisions specific to the purchase agreement is where we would put those details, not in this resolution. And that's why we didn't put those details in this resolution, to get more specific about local preference and ways that we could prevent people from taking advantage of it or something like that. Can you clarify that for me?
Chair, Councilor Villarreal, so the resolution itself is not prescriptive about the purchase agreement itself. So what I was trying to say is if someone would like to pose an amendment to the section that has a local preference, saying that if someone met the local preference, they would be required to enter into a purchase agreement with higher provisions, they could. I don't believe you have to though, because you will be approving the purchase agreement, meaning that If that is a desire that we should be putting in the agreement, we can move forward with it or remove it out into the purchase agreement. And it's subject to governing body approval, meaning if those provisions, though it's very hard to negotiate purchase agreements while in governing body, but if the governing body did not like the provisions in the purchase agreement, they could send it back or ask for revisions and draft of different language. So I think there are two bites at the apple, but
Thank you, Ms. Salazar. You actually just stated what could be an amendment. That sounds fairly easy. And then there's this other option of actually putting in provisions to the purchase agreement. So for both, obviously, I think what you just stated was an easy amendment to this, and the sponsors would be happy to work with staff and Councilor Cassett to make that happen.
Okay, Councilor Lindell.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things. I don't understand, Councilor Garcia, why a local developer would feel that they were being strong-armed out of this process. I have no clue of how that would be happening.
Is that a question to Councilor Garcia?
Yeah,
And is Councilor Garcia, I don't see your box, so I assume you're still in the background somewhere.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'm still here. And happy to answer Councilor Lindell's question. Local developers feel like the city is not giving any opportunity for them to participate in developing our city-owned property. And by offering this local preference, we are extending an olive branch to our local developers, essentially saying, we want you to participate. We are asking you to participate. And not only that, we are going to give you preferential points and a potential price break on this if you can come to offer you a seat at the table. That's what we are doing through this. We are offering a guaranteed seat at the table for these folks, should they have the credentials to do so.
I don't understand why they aren't able to have a seat at the table anyway. No one has excluded them.
Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, the local developers feel very excluded. I don't know which developers you've been talking to, but the ones we've talked to feel like they have no say, and they've been excluded from the development of the properties that that the city has owned. And by offering this opportunity, I see this as a potential pilot process where it can be, if this is successful, it can be replicated for future uses. If it's not successful, as mentioned earlier, if we don't have any applicants, then we can come back and redraw and say, well, maybe we got to do something different for local preference, but we can't say we didn't try. And I think through this proposal is we are trying. We are figuring out how to try to give our local developers an opportunity to develop this property.
Maybe it's the idea when you said that they were being strong-armed. I don't think anybody's strong-arming anybody. But the other part of it is when we talk about a local developer, there is absolutely nothing in this that talks about local developers using local subcontractors. And the developers I have been talking to, they have a very hard time getting local subcontractors. So, additionally, let's just go backwards for a second. When's the last time that the city sold any sizable piece of property for development? So the idea that developers feel like they're not, that they're being strong-armed out of the process, we haven't had any sizable city development in a very, very long time that I'm aware of. Maybe we have, and you can refresh my memory on it, but I'm totally unaware of it.
Madam
Okay.
Chair, Councilor Lindell, happy to respond. If we recall, the last time we had a major opportunity for local folks to participate in development was the Midtown RFEI process. And our local folks felt like they were overlooked.
Okay,
I
we're gonna
think
move
we're-
on. We're gonna move on.
Madam Chair.
Can we go back to the squares, please? Counselor Rivera.
Counselor Romero Worth, I think I still had the floor.
Oh, sorry. I just,
Um,
again, I'm just concerned, counselors, we all are downtown in a snowy night, not on Zoom. So if everybody would just, we still have 2 more items to go. We've got staff here. And some of these conversations maybe are sidebars.
In consideration, I will yield the floor.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Rivera.
I'd like to make a motion for approval.
We have a motion to approve this item. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further conversation? Okay, seeing none, can we get a roll call, please?
Certainly, Madam Chair. Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
Counselor Lindell, you're muted.
I'll abstain.
Counselor Rivera,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth.
No.
Motion passes.
Okay, on we go. We are going to move on to, where are we? Item, is it J, right? J, item J, which is a resolution relating to firearms, recognizing that certain city properties are used for school-related activities, which makes the carrying of deadly weapons on such property a 4th-degree felony pursuant to NMSA 1978, Section 30-7-2.1, and directing the city manager to work with staff to post notice on such facilities. Tonight, we have with us Kira Ochoa, our Director of Community Health and Safety, as well as Aaron McSherry, City Attorney. And I believe, Councilor Rivera, you pulled this item.
You, Madam Chair, Director Ochoa or Ms. McSherry, whoever wants to answer this, does NMSA 1978, Section 30-7-2.1 say that this is only during when school activities are happening, or is it any time?
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, the statute states that, and I have the language here. This would be the case that these deadly weapons would be prohibited in public school related and sanctions activities when they're being performed. So the reading of, I'm sorry, I'll actually defer to the city attorney because I'll bungle this, but essentially our being is a constant state in our interpretation.
Chair Romero Worth, Councilor Rivera. The word being is in both of the definitions. So if it's either a high school or a facility that's not a school building, but it is used in public buildings for school-related or sanctions events that are being performed, doesn't say the word when is not in there.
So your interpretation is that, let's say Southside Library, all the kids are in school, there are no kids or no school kids there, that the signs could still remain up during that time.
Chair Romero Worth, Councilor Rivera, that seems to be a reasonable reading of this. And it would be similar to when these schools, the junior highs and high schools, are not being operated under the supervision of a local school board, because that's the same verbiage that's used for schools. I don't think anyone would say suddenly, as soon as the school board is not in session, guns are allowed in schools.
I just wanted to make sure signs weren't going to be taken up and down every
Right.
time kids were there. And then
Right.
also that it wasn't just for public school kids, that it's all kids. Whether you're in a Catholic school or a charter school or whatever else. that the signs would remain up for everybody.
So Counselor Merriworth, Counselor Rivera, the statute is specific to public school related activities and public school sanctioned activities. So it would have to be some sort of activity or related sanctioned event by the public schools, at least according to the statute. There is maybe an interesting constitutional argument to be made there, which we could look at. I'm not sure we have any facilities that we know of where only private school events take place, such that that would create a problem for the city. But there was some case law a few years ago about the states subsidizing private and public schools for their school books, and we have to look at the outcome of those cases because there were some restrictions there. So it is a little bit of an awkward limitation, but I'm not sure it really impacts any of the city's buildings at this time where we would be using them not for public school sanctioned or public school related events, but we do use them for private school related events. As far as I'm aware, anything we use for private school related events is also used for public school related events.
Yeah, so they would be covered by the signs regardless.
That's right. Yeah.
So this is, I assume these signs will be going onto all city buildings or school related functions may or may not happen, including City Hall and.
Chair Merriworth, Counselor Garcia, or Counselor Rivera, I'm sorry. We would not put them up at all facilities unless we identified that they are all being used for school sanctioned or related events. And at this point, I don't think we've identified that. City Hall is being used for school related or sanctioned events because we have interns in the building, which are sponsored by the public schools. There are likely locations in the city that we don't know of something happening there.
So since this is currently in state law, what's prohibiting us from putting signs up today without the use of this resolution?
Chair Merriworth, Counselor Rivera, there really isn't anything preventing it. I think this is just identifying a unified approach and making sure folks are aware of it.
All right, and then lastly, are we going to be putting up signs at our parks, and how many signs and where would they be put up at?
Chair Merriworth, Counselor Rivera, I'm not aware of if we have the specific plan on that, but parks would certainly be covered if they're used for, I know that we're using some for soccer, particularly the MRC. I don't know if Director Ochoa has information on that. This resolution doesn't require it to happen in a particular method, but it requires signs to go up at MRC as a starting point at least, and other locations as appropriate.
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, I think for our summer youth program, there are parks that are consistently used at that time. So that might be an example of a sign going up for that period for the summer, for example. But I think we'd have to examine that on a case-by-case basis.
I heard it wasn't for a period, they would be up year round.
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, we could leave them up year round. I think parks are a good question, because they're a little more fluid. And it's not a constant state that there's a program there. So one year there might be one and one year there might not be one. So they might be something that we have to take a special look at.
And are we going to consider the trail system as well, since we have kids that walk, especially in District 3, walk through the trail system to the Southside Library?
Counselor, Chair Merriworth, Counselor Rivera, I do want to, I guess, emphasize that it's not just if there are children that are there. It is either sanctioned activities, public school sanctioned activities, or related. So it just wouldn't be that if there are children present, the statute would apply.
Yeah, I get it. So if you have a sanctioned event that Cesar Chavez is going to walk over to the Southside Library, they map out either the sidewalk or the trail. Let's say the trail for this. But we need signs on the trails as well.
Chair Merriworth, Counselor Rivera, I think if we knew there was a use, like an ongoing use, then we certainly could put up those signs. We don't know, then I don't think we're going to put up signs unless we know. And then the other thing is the signs aren't what makes it illegal. So if it is an area that is already being used for public school sanctioned or related event, it is already illegal. So the citation could occur already.
Right. I get it, and I understand the idea of wanting to feel like we're doing something to address all this gun violence. It just seems a little odd to me that we're doing a resolution that's allowing us to do something we're already allowed to do and is already in violation of law if it did happen. So you said that if, you know, there's a sanctioned event and somebody walked in with a weapon, this could already come into play and be a felony. So, yeah, and I assume, hasn't been challenged, has it, in the courts?
Chair Omerworth, Councilor Rivera, I'm not aware of any challenges. Albuquerque did something very similar via executive order, essentially, by Mayor Tim Keller in 2020.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Lindell.
My hand is up from before, but I'm willing to make a motion, Chair.
Great.
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there discussion? And I would just, since we have the city attorney here, I would just one question. So really what we're doing here is these signs are helping the public, are providing notice. They're helping the public to understand what the state law is with regard to our city facilities.
Chair Omerworth, I think that's a good assessment. Yes.
Okay. It's not that we couldn't do this or, you know, without the resolution or that it isn't already state law. It's just helping people to know. I did have an email from a constituent who said, you know, they carry a gun on field trips. Well, I think that currently is not allowed. And so, but they don't know. So I think we are doing a service by kind of putting up signs so people know, you know, it's like the speed limit sign, right? It doesn't mean you will obey it, but you at least are on notice of what the behavior is we want to see.
Chair Omerworth, I think that's right. And one thing I would say about field trips, I'm sure schools have their own individual rules about that. But the part about school sanction related events is public school or public buildings and grounds. So if it were at a private business or a privately owned facility, the statute wouldn't apply, but a privately owned facility could restrict guns as well. And the school itself might restrict them on a field trip, I would guess.
So in that instance, it would be helpful to know, right? To have the signs to know whether these buildings are used kind of similarly to what this resolution contemplates with our signage.
Chair Omerworth, I think that's correct. Yes.
Okay, interesting. All right, other conversation, Councilor Rivera.
One more question. You know how this law works, and are there any contradictions with the concealed carry laws?
Councilor Omerworth, Councilor Rivera. The way I understand this, it would apply to anyone with concealed carry license as well. There are some exceptions for like public safety officers and some other folks. I could pull that up. Do you have one for now? That's not a section I've looked at recently, but there are exceptions. Peace officers, security personnel, hunter safety training, a school approved program involving the carrying a deadly weapon, private automobiles, at the person or another person's property, which it's not clear why that would be applicable here, given that we're talking about public property. Or for lawful protection of, yes, these are ones I have looked at recently. Older than 19 on school premises in a private automobile or other private means of conveyance for lawful protection of the person's or other person's property. So those are the exceptions that are contemplated. So if someone had a concealed carry and they fell into that one of those categories, seems like they probably still could carry.
That's all I had, Madam Chair.
Okay, other conversation, questions, concerns? I think we're ready for a vote if you want to take the roll, Miss.
Certainly, Madam Chair. Counselor Cassett,
Yes. Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Rivera,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth.
Yes. Motion passes. Okay, one more item we have, consideration of Bill 2022-27, a resolution relating, oh, sorry, my thing didn't change. An ordinance relating to electric bicycles, amending section 12-1-6 of the Uniform Traffic Ordinance to include electric bicycles in the definition of bicycle, amending certain sections. I'm not going to read all of this. I think we all are familiar with this bill. And I believe that it is here tonight for a technical amendment. Counselor Cassett, you have your hand up, and I believe you pulled this item, or no, it's on discussion, but you are offering the amendment tonight, is my understanding.
Yes, I am. So the amendment that Counselor Garcia and I are sponsoring on page 1, line 15, strike not. So it would read, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but amending section 12-1-88 of the UTO to specify that electric bicycle is a vehicle. So an electric bicycle is a vehicle. And that's all. I guess I need a motion to approve the ordinance. So move to approve ordinance.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Now we have an amendment.
Move to approve the amendment.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the amendment. Is there discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, can we call the roll on the amendment?
Certainly, Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Rivera,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth.
Yes. Okay,
Motion passes.
that motion passes. Now we're on to the main motion, which is to approve the bill as amended. Do we have further discussion on that?
Madam Chair, so we've had issues with the titles being changed and those changes not being reflected when we go to governing body. So I guess just clarify who's gonna make sure that the amendments, especially to, or the one that was just passed, actually make it to governing body.
Right, and I think that's the whole reason why we made the amendment, is to make sure, is because we had made an amendment that was not, and the title was not amended. So the amendment wasn't reflected in the title, which is why it had to stay here for this amendment. So that now it can be noticed and then it goes on to governing body. So I think they're well aware of what needs to happen here.
Just wanted to bring that up. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, good point. All right, if there's not further discussion, can we get a roll call?
Madam Chair, do you need a motion and a second on the action item?
No, we had that to start with, and it was Counselor Cassett and Counselor Rivera. So we first had the motion on the bill, and then we had the motion on the amendment. And we had to vote on the amendment first, and now we're back to the bill as amended because we accepted the amendment.
Okay, thank you. Got it. Okay, Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Rivera,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, terrific. We have no executive session tonight. Matters from staff,
None at this time.
matters from the committee. Matters from the chair. Our next meeting, Monday, January 30th, and we are adjourned. Be careful out there, everybody going home. It's slicky. Good night, you guys out
Good
there
night.
in
Bye,
Zoom
bye.
land.
Good night. Thank you.